So again, another welcome. This is on Ukraine and the Ukrainian border in Hungary, and I was with the Baptist on Mission from North Carolina, and that comes out of the Baptist Convention in the Raleigh office. And primarily, the Baptist on Mission are disaster relief groups, and they primarily travel to hurricane areas, disasters, floods, fires, tornadoes, earthquakes, from Texas all the way to New York. This was the first time the Baptists have ever sent a disaster team out of the country to a war zone or near a war zone. So, being the first team to go do this, there were a lot of administrative and red tape issues. Instructions, directions changed every 8 hours, but we finally got there. So this is Ukraine, the Baptist on Mission, and the Baptists send you their regards. So why? The why for me that I needed to go was I do believe that evil wins when good does nothing. And I felt like I needed to go and try to neutralize in some small way the evil that's being perpetrated on the Ukrainians. So I was willing to go. The also why is the Baptists had this scheduled. I was on their roster to go, and talking with my daughter, we thought, why Ukrainians? Well, this morning, Angie talked about in our Sunday school class, God's children are precious, no matter where they are. So whether they're here, Honduras, or Ukrainians, they are precious. And my daughter Kimberly and I talked, and we identified in our own circle of friends and contacts 6 people who are either from Ukraine, Russia, or still have families in either one of those countries. So I felt particularly close to the issue. And having said that, I thought, well, that's the why I need to go and why I need to go now. The week that we were planning to go, you probably saw this on the news, the Statue of Liberty being draped in the Ukraine colors. And this was so inspirational to us, to me and the team. It just brought tears to our eyes, and we thought we really need to go now. Ukraine needs America. Ukrainian needs American Christians. And so that was another why. Did any of you all see this on the news? Did anyone see this?
No.
It was all great. Okay, it was all over the news. The where? Okay. We know Europe, we know Eastern Europe, but do we really know where Ukraine is? Truthfully, I wasn't all that sure about the borders and the boundaries of Ukraine. So let's take a look at where it is. All right, this is the border of Ukraine. Russia's right there. Ukraine is the size of Texas. Over here is Hungary. Hungary is the size of Indiana. Much, much smaller. That gives us perspective. This little gold section right here, this actually belongs to Ukraine now. It formerly belonged to Hungary before World War II. It's the area of the Carpathian Mountains. There are still hundreds of thousands of Hungarians that live in Ukraine and that area. There's a lot of political tension between Hungary and Ukraine because Ukrainians are now trying to force the Hungarians living in this area to give up their language and their culture. But to Hungary's credit, when Ukraine and Kiev was attacked, Hungary has stepped up to the plate. The entire country has opened their arms, their hearts, and their schools for refugee centers for Ukrainians making their way from Kiev into Hungary, that they can stay in these and hopscotch into the schools, spend the night, get food, rest, and assistance and transportation to the other areas of Europe where they may have friends and family. So I wasn't really sure about the size of Ukraine and Hungary, but now it makes it real clear to me the size of the area we're talking about. Texas, Indiana. Let's take another look. All right, here is Ukraine. They're the Carpathian Mountains that I talked about, where the Hungarians are still living. And here's Hungary. If you can look at the border here between Hungary and Ukraine, that's about 83 miles. 83 miles long. That's about the distance from Norfolk to Richmond. And in that 83-mile long border, there are 5 refugee centers. One is run by the Baptists, one by the Catholics, one by the Lutherans, the Mormons, and the Salvation Army. All under the umbrella of the Hungarian government, which is also providing their school facilities. You know, the school facilities are public facilities. They're also providing food, cash, and whatever else is needed to move the Ukrainians in and along in a safe measure. So, where do we go here? There's the Hungarian border, 83 miles long. Now you're hearing about Poland. The Polish border, that's 332 miles long. That's the distance from Norfolk to the state line of West Virginia. I don't know how many refugee centers they have there, but when I was in Hungary a couple weeks ago, when I got there, there had already been several 100,000 Ukrainians crossing the border into Hungary. By that same time, there were already 1 million had crossed into Poland. And now the Baptists are sending this last week more teams into the Poland area as well as the Hungarian. And I heard or read in the last couple weeks that 1/4 of the Ukrainian population has evacuated their country. They have left. And the ones that are there now are being bombed out and starved out. And this is not going to go away for a very long time. So that's the prayer of it. Is anybody surprised about the size of these countries? I was. I learned some geography. Okay. This is the Baptist warehouse in Budapest, where we flew into in the center of the country. This has been here a long time. It just didn't pop up for the Ukrainian crisis. There are many Baptist churches all over Hungary and Ukraine. It was the Baptist mission to plant those churches. So this is their continuous warehouse, which now is full to the ceiling with donations coming from all over Europe, all over Ukraine, well, the ones that can get out of Ukraine, all over Hungary, and what the Americans are able to bring in. And this is where, when you send money, or anyone sends money to the Baptist missions for the Ukraine mission, this is where the goods that they buy are stored. They need lots and lots of men with muscles to work these warehouses every day for receiving, sorting, repackaging, and loading into the vans to go all over, not just Hungary, but all over the European countries that are taking the Ukrainian refugees. And as of last week, there are teams in Hungary that are driving back into Ukraine with food and supplies to try to reach the Ukrainians that are being starved out. So they are going back in a line of fire to deliver these goods. But this is the major warehouse in Budapest. Every school that is a refugee center, their gymnasium has been given over to either sleeping quarters for 70, 80, 100 people on cots and mattresses, or it's an auxiliary warehouse, local warehouse that's with goods coming out of here, supplemented by donations that are being made by the local townspeople, who, by the way, are not rich people. They're not even middle class by our standards. They live very modestly. Some of them don't even have hot water in their homes. But they're giving, the Hungarians are giving what they've got to aid their Ukrainian neighbors. Yes, ma'am.
The workers in these places, are they paid or are they volunteer?
Volunteer.
Wonderful.
Volunteer.
Amazing.
It's all volunteer. And there are a lot of American Baptist missionaries in Hungary and Ukraine. the ones in Ukraine are still there, and they provided like an underground railroad for the Ukrainian refugees to make their way from Kiev westward to the border. So it was like a stepping stone along the way. Now this looks like nothing, and you're right, it's nothing. It used to be a whole line of trees along the highway. Can you see the cars in the upper right hand? You see the cars right there? Okay, that's a highway from where we stayed in our bunkhouse, and this is the drive to the town on the border where we work in the refugee center. What you're looking at that is no longer there is that whole line of trees, and they've been cut down to the ground. When Russia attacked Kiev, the Hungarians, Hungary as a country, is a NATO country. So they shouldn't be all that worried, but they are, because 80% of their oil and gas comes from the Russian pipelines. So they're a little nervous. What our Hungarian translators explained this, what was happening here, is an anticipation of a Russian convoy coming into the main roads into towns all over Hungary. They are clear cutting the side, a big swath on either side of the highways, so their military has good visibility on either side of the road if the Russians decide they will invade a NATO country and just drive right on in. Also, in some areas there are ditches that are 6 feet deep, taller than me, and our Hungarian translators again said that their local officials are telling the townspeople these are ditches to lay cables. You don't need 6 feet to lay a cable. So the Hungarian townspeople are saying that these are trenches in anticipation of any kind of convoys that might be coming in. So this was started in Hungary right at the very first of the invasion of Kiev, even knowing that they are a NATO country. So they're worried. They're calm, they're composed, they have a can-do attitude, and they just march right on getting things done in spite of making subtle preparations for what might come. So here, this little town at the bottom, Tisbex. This is the town on the border of Hungary and Ukraine where our mission team went. It was a refugee center in a public school. And that's Tisbex, that's how you pronounce that. And if you could see the slide better right here, it says Help Center in English. There are 3 or 4 different languages. Languages are an issue. Americans don't speak anything but English. Hungarians don't speak Ukrainian. Ukrainians don't speak Hungarian. Russians only want to speak Russian. And there was a mix of everything. And then when you have volunteers from all the other countries, like Poland and Switzerland and Holland and Austria, it's a Tower of Babel. It's the Tower of Babel, but we had excellent and a lot of translators that were multilingual, which is not one of my skill sets. This is a beautiful little old school in the town where we slept in a bunkhouse, and it's a Baptist-run year-round school and a summer camp for Vacation Bible School. So we were lucky enough to be able to sleep indoors in this bunkhouse. We had envisioned sleeping outdoors in tents and in barns, but we actually were able to sleep inside. But this is the schoolhouse. Inside of there, the gymnasium again has been given over to sleeping quarters. The location of this is between Budapest and the border, about 3 hours from Budapest, 2 hours from the border. And all along the way from the border of Ukraine, all the towns are providing, like I said before, room and facilities inside their schools for refugees who are trying to make their way across Hungary. The what? Okay, so you saw where we were, where Ukraine is. So what's happening? This is what's happening. This is the little local schoolhouse, And this is just one of the rooms that's receiving donations of clothes. They're not giving away their worn out shoes and sweaters like we find at coming into Goodwills. It was the good stuff. These Hungarians are giving top drawer out of their closets. They're not giving away junk. We were so impressed. Our job the first day, we had a team. Part of our team stayed in Budapest to work in the warehouses. The men with the muscle stayed there. And the women and a couple men went on to stay in the bunkhouse, like I explained. So the first day, we didn't see any refugees. We were at this little local school trying to get them set up to receive refugees coming through their town. So our job the first day was to sort all of this into women's clothes, men's clothes, and all of those categories that you need to help people find what they need. So the who are doing what? Well, here are the who's. The one on the left, oops, let's go back here. That is my daughter, Kimberly. She's a little mischief maker that didn't want me to go and called up the director. And I don't know if you read the newspaper report, but she called up the director of Baptist on Mission, the Baptist Convention in Raleigh, and said, my mother is a senior citizen and she is too old and fragile to be going on these mission trips in a war zone. And the woman said, well, Kimberly, you know, most of our volunteers are senior citizens. And she said, well, my mother is different. She's a grieving widow and she has no business going on this trip. I mean, she really wanted me off of that trip. And the woman wouldn't budge. And so finally, Kimberly made the ultimate threat. Well, if my mother goes on that trip, then I have to go on that trip too. And so Teresa says, okay, Kimberly, sign up here. so she ended up going, and then the joke among my children, my 4 children, was that the new nomenclature for this whole adventure, if you can call a mission an adventure, is it's Bunny the Baptist and the bodyguard, and Kimberly is the bodyguard. But she went, and she did good. She was very, very nervous, as I was at first, thinking Ukraine, the border, I don't know about that. So that's Miss Kimberly, my little mischief maker. This gal in the center's name is Christy. She's Hungarian. She was our roommate. She and her mother, Hungarian of course, they were our roommates. But they live in Spain. They moved to Spain 10 years ago, and they run a hotel along the Santiago, Camino de Santiago pilgrimage trail. So when the war broke out, when Kiev was attacked, they came back to Hungary to work on the border refugee centers to help the Ukrainians. They came back from Spain. Amazing people. And this is one of the ones I want to spend just an extra minute on. This gal, Christy, was just delightful. And when I got to know her a little better, was a little bit more comfortable about asking her personal questions. And Kimberly had said, Mom, you cannot ask anything about Vlad the Impaler. That's a highly controversial subject. And I said, but I know we're hungry. I just find somebody I can ask. So when I got comfortable with Christy, I asked her the question. I said very tactfully, how do Eastern Europeans, Hungarians, and Romanians feel about Vlad the Impaler? And Kimberly just about fell over backwards. And Christy says, I'm so glad you asked. I am a student of Vlad the Impaler, and I have spent the last 3 years writing a book in English. She's researched it in 3 different languages. She's writing the book in English. When it comes out, I'll let all of you know if you want to learn about Dracula and Vlad the Impaler. So that just worked out perfectly. And then there I am on the end. And I wore those bandanas with the smiley faces and the colors to be friendly for the children. It's such a scary situation. You know, it's kind of like a pediatric cancer ward. You try to make things as friendly and benign as possible. So I always had those on. Okay, here's another classroom that we were assigned to go through those bags, sort out men's, women's, children's shoes, bedtime sweaters, and all of that. First day, we saw no refugees, and this was in a little local schoolhouse. They relocated the children. The children were put into other schools, and everybody was doubling up to accommodate the Ukrainian refugees coming through. here we are again. You know, we've been there all day long, and the little gal on the end is from, oh, where'd I go here? There you go. The little gal on the end runs a year-round Baptist Training Center in Eastern North Carolina. And this is Christy again. And there's Kimberly, and see how she's sweating? We worked her hard. So that was first day, and this is another classroom. They've cleared out a desk, and in these smaller towns with the smaller schools, their little classrooms will sleep maybe 10 to 20 people per room. Same, we try to give families more privacy if there's room in a school to give a family one whole room. Doesn't happen very often. Constant need for sheets, because in a facility like this, and the one that in Chesapeake's, they can't be reused. You have to either, someone can use it once and you throw it away, or they use it once and it has to be washed. If there's ever an outbreak of bed bugs or body lice or head lice in a facility like that, it just shuts them down. So we were always short of sheets, and women, you'll appreciate this, they do laundry like our grandmothers did. And the washing machines are very small. It's not the wringer type, it's an electric. But then everything has to be hung outside to dry. They don't have dryers. It was 20 to 30 degrees there the week I was there. And these women were having to constantly wash to try to keep up in the big center with sheets. So we were always short on sheets there. Okay, here's another small room. It's a family room for mom and dad and a couple kids, able to carve that out. Now this is, we're moving now. That was a small school in the town where we slept. 2 hours to the east on the border, 2 blocks from the border is this school, and this was the major refugee center where we spent our days, 24 hours a day. We worked 8, 10, 12-hour shifts. We had 2-hour drive to the center, 2-hour drive back at night. The buses were coming 24 hours a day, so we had to be in the center 24 hours a day. So it was a nice modern facility, but they relocated all the children. The children have been dispersed to other schools. Maybe they're being homeschooled. We don't know, but there were no children there because the bottom floor was for the refugees, and there's just a constant stream of them coming in. We had thousands a week coming through. 70 could spend the night there in the gymnasium. The rest of them were sitting in the halls, propped up sleeping. Upstairs were the classrooms where the volunteers put their stuff, you know, the backpacks and cell phones and stuff like that. And we were able to sneak up there during the day to take a little nap, or in the middle of the night, the volunteers that had overnight duty. But the children were gone. So how is all this happening with all these people moving around? Well, this is one of the Baptist vans, and it's business as usual when there are no refugees, but they were commandeered for the refugee program of moving donations and supplies from one center to another, filling up the van with refugees that had come to the Chesapeake Center that just got to the border, but they didn't have any friends or any family anywhere in Europe. They had nowhere to go. So these vans would take them from the big school center to the smaller towns that I just showed you that were set up to take refugees. The plan is for those people with no friends or relatives in Europe to stay there for a maximum of 30 days until the Baptists can get Baptist churches to take them in on a long-term basis. Some of these people may be showing up in the U.S. Hopefully, you know, our churches around the country will house and adopt these families that just have no relatives outside of Ukraine. And a lot of them have no money because the banks were bombed. Any of them with Russian names, their bank accounts were frozen if they had them in other countries. I ran into that quite a bit. So not only were the houses bombed out, their automobiles bombed, they had no money. They arrived at the border with just the cash in their pocket that they had for the week. So the Baptist vans will transfer them right on down the line. So what and where? All right, this is What is it? That's the border between Hungary and Ukraine. It's not very impressive, and it's very quiet, boring, but it belies the tragedy that's coming across and through those gates. It's no bigger than the toll booth coming across the Yorktown Bridge. We came across it this morning. It's no bigger than that. But on the other side, refugees told us that the cars and trucks and buses were lined up for days. And they went days without food and without toilets. Just parked, waiting to get through that border gate right there. And the buses Hungarian buses would pick them up at this border and then drive them to our facility 2 blocks away. So that's the Hungarian border. Not very scary, and it shouldn't be scary because it's been a friendly border until the Russians invaded. Okay, what's this? This is the street where that modern school building is. I just showed you where the major refugee center is, 2 blocks from the border. We're looking down the street. That's my shadow right down there. You see that line of little white post? That's the border between Hungary and Ukraine. Not a big event, and it's been friendly and quiet. It's still friendly and quiet. It's not like what you see in Mexico, you know, with the thousands and thousands, you know, lining up and pushing and shoving. No, it was very orderly. It was very quiet. People came on trains. They came on buses. They came on cars. Some walked. A lot of them walked through. But that's how close our school refugee center was to the border. Okay, and this is outside the schoolhouse, and this is Judith. It's spelled like Judith, but it's Edith. And this is the welcome center outside the school, and it's heart and hands. I can't read that, don't ask me, but it's heart and hands. It seemed friendly and welcoming to Ukrainian refugees, and I was told that was Ukrainian right here for the welcome center. Okay, we're looking at the little white tent here. Here's the bus. This bus has just come from the border. We'll be letting off passengers. And by the way, we were not there to take pictures. And we were told not to take pictures of anyone's faces. Try to be careful not to be alarmist. And the only time the volunteers had time to take photos was in between buses when we dispatched all the people that had come prior. And then we would run around and snap pictures. That's why you're not seeing groups and big hordes of people. They have come and gone because our function there was not to take photos, but I tried to take as many as I could because I knew I wanted to share this when I got back home. So that little white tent is where our volunteers stay 24 hours a day, 20 degrees, 30 degrees at night. They were out there all night. The refugees have been out in the cold as well. You know, they don't run those buses, the heat in those buses all day long. So they come out here and walk down that path, and here we are again. Now if you look right between the building, that's where that modern building is I just showed you. The modern school building where the major facility was. So here are people in orange over here. Doesn't look very busy, but I'm telling you, we've processed thousands of people through there constantly. So this was a lull, and we're able to get out there. There's a parking lot in here where drivers would wait for people to come across the border, and then once they registered with the police, got a police sticker for their car, got one for their wallet, and got all the information about the refugees they were taking, where they were taking them, who they are, where their contact person was on the other end. Then they were allowed an official to be able to move on down the line. Oh, whoa, let me show you. See that ditch?
Yeah.
See that ditch? I think you could lay a lot of cable in that ditch.
Yeah.
You could probably also put a lot of soldiers in that ditch. So I'm just showing you again between those two buildings was that. All right, this is the warehouse and an auxiliary building at the school. This is a small one at the school at Chisebec's on the border. Most of this stuff came out of the warehouse in Budapest. And see that big mound back there? That's all diapers and Pampers. and a lot of canned goods, and the school used these canned goods to feed the refugees as they're coming in. By the end of the week, these piles were up to the ceiling, and this is what the warehouse people do, is try to organize that. And there's an unending need for men and women who have the endurance to work in these warehouses and clear that out. When the refugees come through, they had 1 hour and 1 suitcase to pack for the rest of their lives. They don't have anything that they can carry a lot of stuff with them, but some of them have been in the same clothes for a week. So it's our job to find them clean clothes, snacks to take with them. You just do the best you can. We're putting Band-Aids on a hemorrhage is basically what it amounts to. But there's thank God we're getting all these supplies, but we need more hands to do this. Well, this is Kimberly and me at our little bunkhouse there, getting ready to go to work. We're actually getting ready to get in the van for the 2-hour drive to go to work. The people. Okay. On the news, you're going to see burning buildings and smoke and fire and tanks and guns, but you're not seeing a lot of individual people. And really, that's what the mission team is all about. And it goes true for Honduras and the Friends of Barnabas team. And Barnabas was known as the disciple, was the encourager. And these refugees need encouragement. They need just a moment of respite, if that's all they can get, to give them some glimpse of hope. That's what we do in Honduras, trying to give people hope for a better life. And Carlos, are you here? Yeah, there you are. Okay, you know in Honduras, our doctors and our nurses, we see something needs fixing. Most of the time, we can find a way to fix it. There's no way to fix this refugee problem. Like I said, we're just putting Band-Aids on a hemorrhage. And when we got to the center, what we were told, and we never could identify who the boss was, it was some Baptist person somewhere, but our personal missionary said, look, there's a lot to be done. Take care of the people. They're all traumatized. They're in shock. And find something to do and do it. So those were our instructions, and you have to be a self-starter, and you just find something to do and do it. So the people, theirs and ours. Oh, I wish you could read this. I'll see if I can do it for you. This is President Zelensky, and this was on the internet. Did you all see this on Facebook, on the internet? It says, he could fill up a plane with money and escape Ukraine, but he didn't. He could hide in a bunker, but he didn't. He could hand his country over to the Russians, but he didn't. This is what bravery and honor look like. And those Ukrainians love their president. This guy is highly revered. If you want to read an awesome biography, he's a very interesting character before he ever got into politics. He's not a politician, but he's now president. And I think he's doing a heck of a brave job of it. Zelensky. All right, this is inside the modern school building I told you about. And then, oh, wow. Okay, here we go. This lady here has come in to the reception desk. These are the intake people. These are translators. They're also very good on the computer and IT. So what they will do is interview her, look at all her documents, get her registered as a refugee, find out where she's going, who she's going to be with, where she's going to stay. If she doesn't know and she's one of those people that has no plans, then they will pair her up with a Baptist church and a Baptist convoy that will keep her going on down the line. And they're cold, 20, 30 degrees. It was cold there. And so when I went to get my COVID shot, my required COVID shot at my appointment time, I walked in at the county health center, county health clinic. And when I walked in, the nurses handed me a card, a Hallmark card. It had $200 in cash in it. The 2 nurses and the 2 staff people had taken up a collection, unbeknownst to me, unsolicited by me, and wrote me the kindest thank you card, and I just just tears came out of my eyes. And the nurse doing my little swab said, "Buddy, will you stop that? You're diluting the sample." So we laughed. So what I paid $200. I went right to Walmart and I bought all the hand warmers off the shelf, the chemical hand warmers hunters and skiers use. So I bought them all, filled up the suitcase, had cash left over. I bought bags of Hershey's chocolates, and then I bought bags of kids stickers, like I'm wearing here with the red and blue, yellow and blue, and filled up my suitcase. I got to the airport, and when y'all's traveled lately, you know that the limit's 50 pounds. The suitcase was 52 pounds, and the agent was going to make me take 2 pounds of something out. And I went, "But let me tell you who it's for." So I told her, and she was so gracious. She just said, so she put it on the conveyor. I waved goodbye in my 52-pound suitcase, and off we went. Okay, so this gal here is checking in at that center. And this is what the refugees see when they first come in. This is, the first one's in English. Do you need transportation? And if they need to get to a bus, then our vans will take them to a bus. If they need a train, our Baptist vans will take them to a train. You need a translator. Thank God we had translators. Some people were gifted enough to speak Ukraine and Hungarian. Some could speak Russian, Ukraine, and Hungarian. The Europeans are amazing with their languages. So here you see they've got it in English, and they've got it, I guess that's Ukraine, and that may be Hungarian, I don't know, or Russian. That's above my pay grade. Okay. So that's the first thing they see. Next thing they see, and remember this, if you have read many either history books, historical novels about World War II, the bombing of London, evacuation of the Jews, then you will relate to this. You see this free SIM card? Register here, easy to activate, 50 minutes domestic, voice call in Hungary, 5 gigabytes, free SIM card. Reason is, the refugees were telling us that when the Russians came into Kiev and were bombing, the soldiers would invade their homes and use them for quarters and make the owners of the home go either to the basement or to the outbuildings to live while the soldiers occupied their homes. First thing the soldiers did when they walked in was grab everyone's cell phone, take out the SIM cards so the Ukrainians could not record, photograph, text, or email any of the information out of the country, and also so they could not communicate with their families inside Ukraine. So when they get to the refugee centers, they get these SIM cards. Register here, free SIM card. And these people were panicked. Can you imagine going a week without your cell phone if someone ripped your SIM card out? All right, here we've got some more coming in, and again, I tried not to get a lot of faces, but they are there. They're all in their down coats. It's cold. These are all the volunteers. When the bus comes in, all the volunteers pop out of the sleeping rooms, and we're out on the floor. Okay. That's Kimberly again, but these are the stories. These are 2 Ukrainian college students. Did not speak English. They're kind of smiling there because Kimberly attempted to say hello in Ukraine, and they were laughing at her attempts. But they're traumatized. These are college girls, 19, 20 years old. They're in their dorms, and the dorm is being bombed. Their university classroom buildings have been bombed. They don't have mom and dad next door. They can't call mom and dad next door. They made their way all the way from Kiev, across Ukraine, across the border, days, and some people traveled 2 weeks by multiple transportations to get there. They were just shell-shocked. And Kimberly bonded a lot with the kids this age coming in. I can't call them kids. In the U.S., I call them kids. These young people that we ran into coming out of the colleges and traveling alone were self-sufficient, they were determined, and they were going to get it done, and they weren't freaked out. I can imagine my grandkids on the phone to their moms and to me, "Oh, what am I going to do? They're bombing my building." These kids took charge, left on their own, got themselves across the country in a war zone. Oh, This is Francesca. She's a special story. She's a teacher in Kiev, and she's traveling with her parents. She described to Kimberly, her English was good. She described to Kimberly that they were from an upper middle class family. They had a 200-year-old stone family manor, and so they decided they would stay and tough it out when Ukraine started being bombed. And they stuck to it until a bomb came through the roof, and all of a sudden the living room plaster fell on their heads, and then their house started going up in flames, and they left. She showed us photos of her big, beautiful home before and after the bombing, and it just breaks your heart. Well, a home is just bricks and mortar, lots of people were killed. But so they had just minutes to get out of the place. She is wearing, see this outfit? This is a sweatsuit that we saw a lot of refugees wearing coming in, and apparently some store like TJ Maxx or Belk's had just donated boxes of them to the refugee centers because so many people came out with just the clothes on their back, and she's one of them. So she and her mom and dad are making their way to Spain, to Valencia, Spain, to live with long-lost cousins that they haven't seen in 20, 30 years. So fortunately, they had somebody to go to. She and Kimberly have stayed up. They're still texting and still sending photos, and she would send Kimberly pictures about every 8 hours of where she was and describing where she was staying. But she was a beautiful lady, beautiful family, and just, she's smiling, but her eyes are not. And that's what we found so much. If people weren't just totally shut down, that they were trying to be stoic and brave. This was an invasion of this man's privacy. I hope you'll forgive me, but I want you all to feel what he's feeling, what we felt. He was totally shut down. He was the one person I met all week that no one could communicate with. You see, he's got space beside it. He sat on the very end so nobody could sit next to him. He didn't want us talking to him, sitting with him. We tried to hand him coffee and tea. Nothing. This man was shut down. I can't even imagine what he saw. Now this was early in the week. He may be 60. We were there 2 days, and then martial law set in Ukraine. Then the draft set in for men 16 to 60 could not leave the country. They had to fight at that point. The only exception is if you're over 60 or you have more than 3 children. I don't know this man's circumstances. He wouldn't talk to anybody. He talked to one translator and he disappeared. He must have gotten on a bus or a van to go somewhere. We don't know. We don't know. And we saw a lot of people that were shut down like that, but I found if I could sit with them and just pat their back, handed them the Hershey's. Well, that's the magic word. That's the universal language, Hershey's chocolate. Everybody recognizes Hershey's. So when I would find someone that was dejected, and they all were, if they didn't look up, I just put a Hershey's under their nose. Then they would look up, got more? But they would look up, and at that point, you can make some contact, ask some questions if they could speak English. If not, you do a lot of sign language. You want something to drink? You want something to eat? Do you need the toilet? And I point to the toilets. So you can start making contact with Hershey's. Went a long way. But this man, nothing. He may have less sons back. Now, fortunately, we had Christian. Christian is a monk and he spoke very little English. So the best I can tell you is that he said Mother Teresa, so I assume this is the order of Mother Teresa. He did tell me enough that he's Hungarian. He's been posted all over the world. And so he did sit down and spend time with this gentleman that was just so shut down. I don't know how far he got, but Christian did tell me later that of all the postings he had, the one coming up really frightened him. The week we were leaving, he was driving a van back into Kiev
with it full of bags of mother-baby supplies. Toilets, toiletries for the mom, diapers, formula, and all the things babies and children need to distribute in Kiev. And he was frightened. So even monks get frightened. So we stopped and prayed right then. Our team prayed for him later. Bless his heart, he was one brave man. Now we know that teams at the border are driving back in those vans into Ukraine to deliver food to the ones that are being starved out. But that's Christian. He was everywhere. He was everywhere with everybody. Okay, this is Kimberly again. This little man, he was just the sweetest thing. He's Hungarian. He was discovered riding up and down the streets on a bicycle in front of the school where the refugee center was. Some of our volunteers at the tent out there that spoke Hungarian kind of flagged him down, got to talking, finds out he speaks Hungarian and Ukraine and Russian. So we hired him on the spot to be a translator and brought him in and gave him supper and hot coffee. So he worked a couple days as a translator for us. You get help where you can get it. He was so cheerful. Okay, here is Christian again in the center talking to some more volunteers. Okay, it wasn't just Americans at this refugee center. What impressed me is that all of Europe is behind Ukraine. All of Europe is trying to help Ukrainians. We had volunteers from Austria, Spain, Holland, several carloads of Czech volunteers, young men that came to work in the warehouse and be drivers for the people. This is the universal sign of the Salvation Army. They are manning one entire refugee center on the border, but this crew was in our center, and this lady is Austrian, and she's an officer in the Salvation Army, and she was in our center for the duration of a week. She spoke English. And this young man here, if you can see, this is the English. What does it say here? Emergency Disaster Services. Okay, this is the thank you note that, I don't know why I have it in here, but this is the thank you note that the nurses at the Aby County Mental Health Center wrote me with the $200 in it. And I put it in the newspaper. I just thought that was just so amazing. Just thank you for doing God's work as sisters in Christ. And I didn't even promote, I didn't solicit, I didn't do anything except, will you please give me a COVID shot so I can get on the plane? Oh, that's, okay. These are my hand warmers, my Hershey's chocolates, and the stickers are under there. That's 52 pounds worth. And every day when our team would go to work, I had them out on the big table, and they'd fill their pockets, and everybody was handing them out. The guys standing out at the tents got hand warmers. We gave them to refugees coming off the bus. We gave them to refugees leaving parts unknown. It was empty by the end of the week. This is a special story. This lady was sitting with two friends her age on a bench. She was one I couldn't get to look up. So I went over and handed her the Hershey's that she's holding up here. And she looked up and kind of smiled. And she spoke enough English that I could find out that she also, her home got bombed out. She had to leave. Her husband couldn't come with her because he was in that age group. So he stayed behind to fight, be a soldier. She was devastated, demoralized, heartbroken, and just was hardly responsive at all. So I gave her the chocolate, and then when I found out that she said her husband was going to be a soldier, then I said, well, he's a hero. And she knew hero. She said, yes. And I said, well, he needs a gold star. So out of my bag of stickers, see those little stickers? I've got them right here on me too. I pulled out my kids' stickers, put two on her hand, and said, husband, hero, Ukraine. And she smiled. And she stood up for Kimberly to take a picture. And she's so brave. She's smiling and even tried to wink. So we're keeping up with her too. We don't know how her husband is. They haven't been able to communicate. Don't know what happened to him. But you just do the best you can with what you've got. I imagine her husband looks something like that now. And I imagine that's what she was visualizing. The small print, did anyone see this on Facebook, on the internet? This photo of the soldier? He actually is a world famous Wimbledon champion tennis player. He beat Roger Federer in 2013. He put down his racket, picked up a rifle, and now he's fighting to save Kiev from Russian occupation. Massive respect for the guy right here. Ukrainians are going to save their country or die. And unfortunately, a lot of them are going to die. Noah's Ark. Did you know we had a Noah's Ark at the refugee center? We did. If you had to leave your home in 1 hour, what would you do with your pets, your dogs, your cats? You'd want to. But there are quarantine issues on traveling with pets. Most of these people were not driving their own vehicle. They had to take a bus or a train or hitchhike. And you can't be schlepping pets around, but they found a way to do it. They found a way to do it. So, and to me, this gives a whole new meaning to that term of emotional assistance dogs. Really? These people need emotional assistance. Does everybody in America that calls their pet an emotional assistance dog really need it? So, thank goodness the children could bring their pets with them. And the little dogs just had to sleep where they could. And this is in a hallway where the children and parents were sleeping. The sleeping room was full. They were sleeping in the hallway, living in the hallway, playing soccer, and with the dog sleeping. This woman was, they're all special, but this woman was differently special. She's deaf. She came in with a group of about 15 deaf people, and communicating with them was extraordinarily difficult because all they knew was sign language in Ukraine. We had no signers at the facility, so you do it with eye contact and something to drink, something to eat, toilet. Well, when Kimberly saw her with this little chihuahua, Kimberly pulled out her phone, and there's a picture of her little chihuahua, Bella, that lives with her in Mexico, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So Kimberly showed this lady the photo of her chihuahua, and she started smiling and pulled her dog up to take a photo. So when I finished taking the photo, then this lady motioned to Kimberly to send it to her phone. So Kimberly and this lady, I don't know her name, the two of them have been texting back and forth as she makes her way with her group across Europe with that little dog. And there's that little girl with that little dog again. It's comforting her. Look at her little face. Here's your first cat. Okay, we have to take our cats. This gal is bright-eyed and smiling. Her eyes are even smiling. She is in control of her future. She is an architect student, or was an architect student at the University of Kiev. It was bombed. She evacuated, escaped across the border, and she and Kimberly connected over the animals. And as it turned, her name is Yanni. And Yanni's English was good enough to tell Kimberly that she was going to finish her degree. She was in her senior year, and she was going to find another country in Europe to finish her degree, and she was going to pick the one where the language was the easiest to learn. Which of our kids or grandkids would have the moxie to do that? Not that our kids don't excel on a million different things, but this is self-reliance. This is just determination that impressed us so much. So Kimberly and Yanni are continuing to text as she makes her way into Europe, with her cat. And the interesting thing here is she was so concerned about getting to the border, not being able to bring her cat in to Hungary because of quarantine. You had to be vaccinated. Well, Hungary gave her kitty cat his own passport after they vaccinated him at the border. That was a good story. So some people brought their animals and some animals brought their people. Truly, this is how many of them crossed the border. They didn't have the money for a train. The upper end of society that came across the border, and these were the less fortunate. Pomp and circumstance, and Bunny gets engaged. Okay, this gal here is a journalist. She is Ukrainian. She graduated from the University of Kiev. She's working as a journalist in New York City. When Kiev got bombed, she flew back to Kiev, got herself into Kiev, and is making her way multiple times from Kiev across the border, documenting the refugees' journeys. And she and Kimberly connected because Kimberly has a Marine captain friend who told Kimberly, if you're going to go there, make sure you make friends with the press, because if things turn bad, then the press will be able to find you when other people can't. So Kimberly made extra good friends with her, but she was so cute, her English was so good. Roundabout story, Ukraine to New York City and back to Ukraine. All right, this crew here, we had press there every day. There were news crews from every country in Europe at our center, one day or the other. This right here is a European crew. I don't know which country, but they just finished interviewing me, then Kimberly took the photo. And here they are again, another press corps. He won photos of different volunteers. So I'm from America, and this is my roommate, Judith, who's Hungarian, living in Spain. And then this crew here had a lot to worry about. This man is the mayor of the town. This man he introduced himself as a parliamentarian, which I guess would be like our senator, as me and Kimberly. And this young man was the attorney for the mayor, the town attorney. These two did not smile the whole week. They were the grimmest two men I've ever seen, but they had heavy burdens. They're clear-cutting their highways in case of a Russian invasion. They're digging ditches so troops can get in. They are wondering if they're going to have enough oil and gas, because they're relying on Russia for 80% of the oil and gas. They can cut off the faucet any time. So these guys, and they've had to evacuate this school to make it a refugee center. So they were grim, really, really grim. And I felt so sorry for them. The mayor spoke no English at all. The parliamentarian did. So he was multilingual. So, being so grim, I finally got him to smile, the mayor, because I had lots and lots of stickers, the Ukraine stickers that I put on the children with the yellow and blue stars. But I thought, well, they're Hungarian, so maybe they don't want Ukraine stars. So I gave them Easter bunnies. See the little bunnies? So the kids' stickers. So they told him my name was Bunny, and when I put that sticker on him, he smiled for the first time in the week. You know what? Totally silly, out of context, but the man needed to smile. He really needed to smile. So after we did that, I gave one to the parliamentarian up here as well. And then a few minutes later, he came back over and put this bracelet on my arm. And it's got some Hungarian words that I didn't know. And so when he put it on my arm, he was talking to me. I didn't know what he was talking about, but he knew enough English, so I said, "Does this mean we're engaged?" And so he laughed. Well, then I Googled the words, and it looks like a man's first and last name. But when I Googled it, up popped the Hungarian soccer team. I went, "Oh, I'm engaged to the whole soccer team." But then I looked further, and it actually says, "Hungarians, go for it." So that's the motto, but on the flip side is OV22. Those are the initials of the president who is running for re-election that the parliamentarian is supporting. But I asked other Hungarians and they said we hate him. So you never know. So for the little children, this is what it was about for me. These children were picking up so much on their mother's stress. They were withdrawn. Carlos, they were entirely different than the children that we see in Honduras. You know, those kids want to play soccer, they want to climb all over you, and they're smiling and laughing. These children were withdrawn, and a lot of them just completely shut down. It was so stressful. So coming in off the bus, here we are bringing them in off the bus. And the children, because they were so stressed and picking up so much on their parents' despair, were quiet. There was no running around. You didn't hear any screaming children. You didn't hear the siblings fighting with each other. They sat and they stared. So it was a challenge for me. See, oh, here's a little boy with that little dog again. He's trying to play soccer down that one hallway his family laid claim to. And this little boy could not get him to smile, lift his head, or nothing. Till I handed him a chocolate, Hershey's. He looked up, and so he ate the chocolate, but that's all I could get out of him. He didn't want any more eye contact. So I sat down and had the bag of stickers, you know, these little glitter stickers. So I just kind of rattled them around, kind of dumped some out. So boys react better to that than little girls. It got more curiosity. So soon he would look over and see what I was doing. So I took a couple stickers and put them on my hand, and then I indicated his hand, and finally, after about 20 minutes, the little boy stuck his hand out, and I was able to put stickers on his hand. And that was the best communication I could get with him, and then I could give him a hug. There's some other little boys that were a little bit more outgoing, hadn't soaked up so much stress from their parents. I got them to do Ukraine, high five, and they would do that. So I had like 3 or 4 of them doing that at one time. But there was nothing for these kids to do at the center except just sit there and be depressed. But I love that little boy. He finally brightened up. And these are the gypsies. If you read that article that Carlos forwarded to you that was in our newspaper, I described the gypsies, and they call, it's politically not correct to call them gypsies now, they call them Roma. But there's a huge population in Hungary, and they're not dressed for Halloween. This is their daily dress. The little girls come in high heels with jingle bells on their ankles, taps on their shoes, and they've got glitter and sparkles, and you see all of that. They were gypsies, and they had gypsy behavior, and the Baptists are holding vacation Bible school for them to try to teach them right from wrong, and it's not right to go up to a table of free goodies and steal it. Take everything and put it in your suitcase, then walk across the border, sell it to the refugees coming across the border when they could get to our center and get it for free. So finally, the local police did have to remove a very busy, active Roma family that just had camped out in the sleeping room there, and the mom would send the kids back to the table and back to the table and back to the table to fill their pockets. So, but they were colorful, yeah, without a doubt. And this little girl, same thing. She still looks shell-shocked. And after probably half an hour sitting with her, she let me put stickers on her hand. I had to give her a lot of chocolate, and she ate some, put some in her pocket, but it was the longest time before I could get that child to make eye contact with me. And she finally did. And I could hug her. Okay, folks, how stressed out do you have to be to leave your child behind in a center and be gone for 24 hours and not know she's gone? This little girl, as she has been crying for a whole day. This is her dad. Her mom and dad and her 7 brothers and sisters came to the refugee center, and after feeding them, let them go to the bathroom, let them wash up, give them hot food, let them take a rest in our sleeping room, we made arrangements for that crew of 10 people to be transported on down the line to another school.
Well, somewhere in the evening, we noticed this little girl wandering around crying. She doesn't speak English. Finally, the translators were able to figure out that her parents and her 7 brothers and sisters had gone and left her. Gone. Well, fortunately, they registered at the desk, so our IT people knew where their next destination point was. They got to Austria before we were able to make contact with them until they left one of their children behind. So this message that she has here was a letter to her parents that was posted on Facebook. And that's how they found this child's parents, was on Facebook. Well, the mother stayed with the 7 children. The dad came back together, and when he arrived, the local police took him aside and talked to him for a very long time to make sure it wasn't deliberate that they had just abandoned that child. But her little eyes just swelled shut. She was so terrorized at being in this big building with all these people, didn't know anybody, most of them didn't speak her language, and she didn't know where her parents were. And so how stressed you have to be to leave your child behind for a whole day and not come back and get them. Oh, we saw everything. This was on the internet too. I think it was on Facebook. Ukrainian soldiers praying, and I'm sure that my lady in blue back there was praying for her husband, and hopefully he's one of these praying with the other soldiers. And I just wonder if he was praying from that Bible scripture, Psalms 10, that Josie and Martha sent to me and my team the last day we were there. And if you haven't read it, and I hadn't read it for decades, but it talks about the evil oppressor, the godless oppressor. And at the very end of that long chapter of Psalms 10, it talks about the psalmist is begging the Lord, break the legs of my oppressor. And no doubt that's what these soldiers are thinking and praying for and saving for their country. So we need to pray with them and for them. Where and why? Folks, one reason I'm really concerned about the situation is Russia. Once Putin decides that he has Ukraine under control, has the nuclear power plants, has the access to their seaports, he may look eastward and say, oh my goodness, 53 miles between Russia and Alaska, there's the Alaska pipeline. It's only 53 miles away. Why don't we go get it? Ukraine is not way over there. Russia's not way over there. Russia's only 53 miles away from our homeland. The end? Not anytime soon. What I hope I've been able to do today is help you see what I saw and feel what I felt. And Mother Teresa said that in this life, you can't always do great things, but you can do small things with great love. So I hope you will find a way to, if you can't send money to the missions going over there, if there's someone in your community that wants to serve, then help make it possible for them. Tell them to go, you'll feed their cats, you'll feed their dogs, you'll water their plants, you'll come in and look after Granny while they're gone. But these Ukrainians are precious, like Angie said this morning. And Judy said we've got to be careful about sticking our heads in the sand. So I hope we can all, as Americans, keep our heads out of the sand and just be real aware of Ukraine and the needs of the Ukrainians and the many Christians that are over there in dire circumstances. Thank you so much for your time.